Today in the shop, a Volvo 740 sedan, and you've really got to love the rear window on these. It's almost completely flat. It looks so good. I don't know why, but it just looks good. This one will get new coilovers. It will get J-Spec Coilovers from Sweden. The customer ordered them himself. Later on found out that you need to weld those, and that's why it's in my shop at the moment. And I thought it would be a good moment to compare budget coilovers versus premium BC-Racing Coilovers. I found that there's quite a difference in price, but also in quality. So I thought it would be really interesting to find out what the differences are. And of course, I'll take you through the entire process of installing these coilovers. Let's start with the lower section of the front. These here are the BC-Racing ones. As you can see, they have a nice layer of paint on them. I've already welded them to a knuckle for a future customer. What stands out is that the BC ones have this here open, so where the brake lines go in, it's opened. That makes surfacing them a whole lot easier. On the J-Spec ones, it's not removable and they are closed, as you can see. So every time you want to remove the strut, you'll need to undo the complete brake lines, which is a pain because you need to bleed them. As you can see, this here is conical, and on the J-Spec ones, it's completely flat. Another few things where you can notice quality is the tolerance. Everything rattles. There's just a lot of play in the materials. And while the thread size is the same, this here is on the BC-Racing ones. So you can hear there's a little bit of slack as well, but not nearly as much as on the J-Spec ones. The springs, size-wise, they are exactly the same. The big difference is, when you have a closer look at them, is that the BC-Racing coilovers have a protection sleeve around them. When fully compressed, the spring will probably be rubbing here on the bottom and on the top, and these are to keep the paint protected. The last difference is that the BC-Racing ones come with adjustable top hats, and the J-Spec ones don't even have top hats included. So on these you can adjust the dampener and you can adjust the camber, and it makes installing it a whole lot easier. With the J-Spec ones, as far as I can tell, you can't adjust the dampening on these, and the only thing supplied is this top ring, which will go over the spring and I believe adapt to the original top hats. So this is a first for me, and yeah, I'm just taking with me what the differences are. So mainly a big difference in build quality. Over to the rear. This construction also looks a whole lot cheaper than the BC-Racing one. This lower unit is completely made out of steel, while this here seems to be made out of aluminum. Different type of bushing in here, completely CNC made, and this is just a cheaper design. This, however, does have a dust cover, which is nice. No adjustment on top for the compression or rebound, and again we have quite the slop in here. Of course, once tightened down you won't notice it, and it's not that bad. This bushing here also seems to be needing a sleeve, which they supplied, to get the correct diameter. So they probably used a universal bushing and then needed to make it smaller. That's what these are for. When I'm installing new coilovers on Volvos, I always remove the entire assembly on the strut. If you don't remove the wheel bearings and all, then everything will start boiling. This grease gets really warm. Of course, it's high temperature grease, but with the welding it can get even hotter, since most of the grease will then be liquid, dripped out of it, and if you don't re-grease everything, it will make a mess and you will probably ruin a wheel bearing. The nice thing with the spatter spray is that almost all of the spatter can be removed very easily. And I must say, this stuff, it welded just as good as the BC-Racing Coilovers do. So welding wise, it's doing absolutely fine. The BC-Racing Coilovers have stickers on them, and I believe it's in the manual as well. Don't heat on these. So on the front struts. And you're wondering, of course you don't want to heat them. But what you also don't want to do is get the freshly welded bottom halves and screw them on there. They are really warm, and that could also potentially damage the cartridge in here. So when those are welded, move on to the rear, and once the rear is done, they should be cooled down enough to do the fronts. So always start on the front, then move over to the back, and then finish off the front. I get asked quite often how you install the rear, and we can see that the rear shock is almost at the eyelid here, but there's still quite some travel left for the spring. What you want to do is that the shock will be the limiting factor, keep the springs in place. So on full droop, when it's completely hanging from the suspension, then you want the shocks to be so short that the springs are under tension in there. So on full droop, the springs should not be loose, especially not like this, but also not a bit. They just need to be firmly in there, and you can achieve that by shortening the body here. Weather is nice. The 740 sedan is lowered. Let's take it for a test drive to see how it handles. It isn't the best running engine that's in here. A verdict for the coilovers, I think for the price, the handling is pretty okay. They're a bit stiffer, and the dampening doesn't feel as good as on the BC-Racing Coilovers. The stiffness feels about the same, but it's a bit more bumpy due to the shocks, at least from what I can tell, feeling a bit more soft, so they can't handle the high spring rate. I live in a rural area, and then these coilovers are so bouncy. Speed bump. Yeah, it's just not, when you go over speed bump, it immediately stops with bouncing. There are like 3 or 4 more bumps after it. So for lowering it and only lowering it, this kit is absolutely fine. But as a daily driver, I think you'll be better off with just springs and some good dampers for a budget option. And if you want to go further, get some BC-Racing Coilovers. And from what I've heard from an Instagram follower is that these J-Spec Coilovers blow the shocks within 1 year. I don't know if it's true, but if it is, then in the end it will be a pretty expensive kit, and you will be better off just buying a BC-Racing Coilover kit. To finish this comparison off, here is a list of all the things that I've written down about the different options. So starting with the different setups, we have lowering springs with Bilstein or any other decent brand shocks, J-Spec Coilovers and BC-Racing Coilovers. Springs plus shocks, normally I would say around 600 euros. J-Spec Coilovers are surprisingly cheap. I just looked the price up, 500 euros, so not too bad. BC-Racing Coilovers, 1200 euros. They are really expensive. Before they were around 1000, but due to the price increase with the shortage of everything, they've become quite expensive. Build quality, I would say springs and shocks, definitely quality. J-Specs, they aren't bad, but they also aren't great, especially compared to the different features we went over from the BC compared to the J-Spec. So quality, BC and springs. Damper adjustment. Most of the shocks and springs won't have it. J-Specs also don't have it. BC-Racing Coilovers do. The ride height, of course, only the coilovers you can adjust the ride height. With the springs, it's fixed. Adjustable camber. The only one is the BC-Racing Coilover set with the J-Specs, original camber plates, with the springs and shocks, also original ones. And these can of course be changed with some other top mounts, but then that will add up to the cost. Comfort wise, in my opinion, springs plus good shocks are the most comfortable option. This gives you the smoothest ride while still handling nice. If you want the stiffest ride or most sporty with comfort in mind, the BC-Racing Coilovers are the ones. And on the last place is 6 out of 10. I would say the J-Specs. Doable for comfort. Like I said, if it's not a daily and you just want to lower it, have it look cool, then these are absolutely fine. And I believe even the manufacturer says it on the website, they are not made for racing, just to lower your car and make it look cool. For that purpose, they are great. A lot of forum posts will tell you that the rear on a BC-Racing Coilover kit is super stiff. And that was true. On the 240 kits, they changed the rear spring from a 6 kilo per mil to a 4 kilogram spring per millimeter. So they are a bit softer in the rear. The Volvo 940 ones, as far as I know, are still quite stiff in the rear, but it is doable. That was my verdict about the BC-Racing Coilovers versus the J-Spec Coilovers. I must say the J-Specs aren't that bad. They're just a nice option for people that want to have their car lowered and don't need any fancy stuff on them. Then they are fine. If you want more or you're going to track days, I would suggest to spend a bit more on some BC-Racing Coilovers. That was it for now. Now I'm going back to work and then I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.